Okay, we're ready.
Okay. Great. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us for our online Planning Advisory Committee meeting of the 27th of August. If the meeting, usual thing I have to read out, if the meeting has to be called for any reason due to technical or other reasons, the minutes will be posted on our website as usual. Please be aware this meeting is being recorded and streamed live. If you don't agree to this, either turn your camera off or leave the meeting, please. The protocol will be for attendees to pose questions through the chat box if it's there, and we will answer the questions at all. If anyone wants to speak, attendees, please let us know and we'll try and make that happen. Likewise, councillors, if you want to raise anything, please raise your hand so that I can see you. Similarly, voting councillors, please raise your hand until the vote has been recorded by Jane or Hannah. Jane will clerk as normal and help to ensure we don't miss any important questions and attempt to show plans, photos on the screen where necessary, and Hannah will take the minutes. No further ado, we'll move on to item number 1 on the agenda, which is questions, comments and information from the public and councillors not relating to any of the applications in the appendix on item number 4. So, is there any questions? Rich.
Thanks, Steve. I know Lenka, who I think is here, raised the issue of the Westbury incinerator, and I think she might be wanting to ask a question about it, but I'd like to propose that we look at that in 3 weeks' time because it's still within the deadline. I think it would be good for us to examine that as a group and see what we think.
Yep.
Lenka does have her hand up, so
right.
Excuse me. If you would you like to bring her in to the meeting?
Please do, yeah.
Can you do that for me, Hannah?
Yeah, I've just promoted.
Okay.
There we go.
Hi, Lenka.
Unmute. Hiya.
Right. Hi.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich, for saying that, and thank you, Jane, for replying to my email. I've sent an email to all of you, so I hope you all got it, and detailing sort of what's happened in the past. And Freedom Town Council you guys have been supportive and put in an objection as a council previously. As Jane said, I think, and Rich just said, if it could go on the agenda for the next meeting, which is the 17th, because the deadline is the 22nd of September for objections to go in. Thank you very much for your support.
Great, no worries. Yeah, we'll make sure that's on the agenda for the next meeting, Lenka.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Thanks very much. Any other questions for anyone? No? Excellent. Okay. Item number 2. Apologies for absence and any declaration of members' interest. Hannah, have we?
We've got apologies from John Nelson.
Okay, great. Do we want to mention the trees at this point, Jane, or?
Yes, we can do. There is an application number 348 on our list, which is the part of the North Parade allotments. Whilst the town council owns the land, we aren't the applicant, but I think, yes, you're right, there should be a declaration from all councillors of an interest because of the land ownership, but we can talk about the application later on if you wish.
Okay, thanks. Mark?
As well as being a councillor and covered by that general declaration, I'm also a member of the Allotment Association in my own name, but my plot isn't at the plot that we're going to discuss. My plot is some way away in Welsh Mill, so a non-pecuniary declaration of interest.
Okay, thanks very much. Nothing else? Excellent, great. Move on to item number 3 of the agenda, to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of August 2020. Has anybody got any comments or corrections to the minutes? No, in which case, can I have someone to propose them, please? That's Mark, and a seconder, please. That's Rich, and all those in favour.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Which moves us on to item number 4. Consider the major plan applications received. So I think, so the first one I think we're going to look at was number 354 on the list, which is 22 Whittocks Lane in Frome. Jane, do you want to introduce it, please?
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify for anybody, any of the attendees, that all councillors have looked at the plans online in advance of the meeting. So unless anybody specifically requests it, then I can show a plan. If not, please be assured that all the plans have been looked at. So this application, as Steve said, is for 22 Whittocks Lane, Frome. And the description is demolition of existing single-storey lean-to extension and fences, and the proposed erection of a 2-storey extension, a single-storey annex, and boundary fence with revised vehicular entrance gate. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the area, this property can be accessed off of Zion Path as well. The vehicular access is actually towards the end of Cook Street, next to the nursing home, with Zion Path splitting them in two. So the site is actually in a conservation area, and the house sits in between 3 listed buildings. So in that sense, it is the conservation officer will view this as being in an area where the design is actually very important in this instance. My initial observations that I sent you was that actually, this does appear to be quite a large extension, and there is also a separate annex as well. I would suggest, given the historic nature of the area, this is probably one where we would want to take the advice of the conservation officer. In the conservation area appraisal that Mendip have done for this area, the properties in this property and the ones that surround it, actually are talked about in quite some depth. So I imagine it will be quite closely scrutinised in that respect. And I did forward you all the comments from the Civic Society, who have probably said what I've just said, but in quite a lot more depth and detail about how they view the impact of the proposals on the historic area. And also, as Mark questioned earlier, there is a declaration of interest at the end of it, because one of the members of the Civic Society lives next door to this property. I have had comments back from some of you, and I think one of the other things I mentioned was that because they're proposing an annex, that there should perhaps be a condition to tie the annex to the main house, and there was varying different views on that. So from a planning point of view, with an annex, the reason that it is normally tied to the main house is to stop the creation of a new house, essentially, a new plot, which could then have its own permitted development and be sold off separately, further separating the historic area. But on the other hand, you might wish to argue that actually, at such a point in time when perhaps the relative didn't need the annex, it could become an affordable home for somebody else in the town. So, I think that's something that the planning officer will look at, and if they feel that there's a necessity to tie it to the main house, then I imagine that's what they will do. But that's just my opinion. yeah, so really, I think it's just over to you to perhaps talk a bit more in detail about how you feel about the size and the design of the extension and the annex in this instance.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. Any comments from any councillors? Excellent. Paul first, then Rich, then Sheila.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I'll get the ball rolling. It's a it's a tricky one, in my opinion. It's certainly big. It's very big, and my inclination is to. Well, I guess my inclination is to not to object to it. However, having read the Civic Society's comments, I'm I kind of inclined to agree with some of their comments. So I'm a bit more kind of on the fence now. I think possibly it is rather large. I'm just looking at the kind of elevations and plans. I mean, it's obviously very large, but it's just noting that the extension is as it says in the design and access statement, the architect has tried to mirror the existing wing to the, I think it's to the west, is it? Just trying to, yeah, the west wing. So with the extension, but in actual fact, the extension is much bigger than the existing west wing. So if that was reduced in scale, that would certainly go a long way to kind of reducing its impact and addressing some of the concerns of the Civic Society, which is reasonable. Other than that, really, I don't have a great problem with it. I support the materials. I like to see that the materials are distinctive from the existing materials rather than trying to kind of copy it in any sense. So and I also welcome the fact that it seems to be using high quality materials. You know, it's got a kind of it's kind of ambitious in terms of its quality, and I think it's kind of ecological credentials, if you like. Although having said that, I did say in my statement earlier, my comments earlier, that the sustainability statement in the design and access statement could be more ambitious. It's a little bit kind of weak and kind of wishy-washy. So I'd like to see that more ambitious. I think that's it for now.
Okay, great, thanks. Rich.
I don't know if I've got an awful lot to add to that. Actually, I kind of tend to agree with what Paul just said. Initially, I thought, well, that's fine, that's okay. It's not a house I particularly feel anything about. It's kind of nice and hidden. There's a big piece of land there, plenty of space to do what they want to do. It does make a large house, but it didn't seem to me to be over the top. Quite like some of the materials. Obviously, got to pay attention to the conservation area. Then, of course, I read Civic Society's thoughts on it. I thought I hadn't really realised it was that important, but I still don't have any strong objections to it. And there's a photograph somewhere, Civic Society's papers, I think, looking at the west wing, what it would look like. But that gate is very rarely open. You very rarely actually see that view. And also, there's some fairly new houses there on the edge of that site, which, you know, are okay, but they're nothing special. But I don't want to detract from the conservation area, but I don't actually have any great objections to it.
Okay, thanks very much. Sheila.
Okay, I suppose I walk past this house umpteen times. When I worked in the Frome Whole Foods, I walked past it every day, at least twice. It's very much more visible now because they've taken down a really tatty looking fence along Zion Path, which, as far as I can understand, they're proposing to put a new fence down Zion Path. So, to be honest, I think the Civic Society is over egging the pudding a bit. It's not very visible. It's a tiny house internally, really small. And I think it's a bit cheeky that a massive house like Melrose is saying, excuse me, you're going to get a big house. And I think it doesn't look over the top to me, but I take your point. I mean, I find it difficult to read these architectural diagrams, so I might be reading it wrong. It seems like it's just making an extra room to the sort of downhill side. And the annex seems quite a good use of a garden that's very difficult to use, to be honest, because most of it's under trees, and the trees have a conservation order on them, I think, because they are quite a special sort of beech tree. So I don't object to it, really, and I think there is obviously an issue between Melrose and this the lady who lives in this house, and I noticed today, for instance, the owners of Melrose were digging out that little channel that runs along the top of the site that we're considering, and they were sort of clearing the rubbish that they dumped there about, you know, a couple of months ago, or even 4 months ago when we went into lockdown. So they were clearing it out this morning, which I thought, well, that's a bit interesting. And so there is an issue. I think we might need to be sort of what's the right word? It's not mentors, it's sort of moderators or mediators between these two families. The woman in this house is quite frankly terrified of the people in Melrose, and has spoken to me, and I think she might have spoken to you, Mark, I'm not sure, or certainly talked to Nick and probably you as well. And so I think it's quite an it's a delicate thing, and I think we need to be careful that we're commenting on it strictly on planning things. I mean, it's interesting that it seems to be some sort of relevant sort of ancient building, and I know the people in Melrose have been researching it in the museum. Sorry, my book's fallen on the floor. It's a delicate situation. I don't object to the plan that's being put forward. I would like some guidance on the sort of sustainability and the positive application of aluminium windows. They seem to be popping up on several houses these days, and there is, I assume, a case to be made for having something that's going to be double glazing or even triple glazed, but is in fact made out of aluminium rather than wood. So at some stage, I'd like some guidance on whether this is a good, you know, sort of way of going forward, and something that we should support as a sustainable method of putting in double glazing.
Thanks. I don't know if Paul or Lizzie want to comment on the benefits or otherwise of aluminium double glazing.
I mean, I can do to some degree. I mean, basically, the modern aluminium windows are thermally efficient because they have insulated frames, so they're far more efficient than the kind of critical windows as you know of the old days, as it were. People are replacing. I mean, I certainly, you know, as an alternative to UPVC, then they're far better. They last a lot longer. They'll stay looking nice for much longer, etc., etc. As a replacement for timber windows, it's a little bit more of a grey area. But actually, many modern timber windows actually come with aluminium cladding these days, because it means they don't have to be maintained, don't have to be painted every other year. So in actual fact, many wooden windows look the same as aluminium windows. So in a sense, there's not much difference. I mean, personally, I'm not that keen on windows of any material trying to pretend to be that they're pretending they're something else. But I think as a kind of practical approach, aluminium windows are absolutely fine, and actually are far preferable to, as I say, to UPVC, and they will last much longer than timber windows if timber windows aren't maintained properly. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts a little bit, but I think possibly one might argue, and I'm sure I know conservation officers would argue that for a listed building, if it's got timber windows, then it should remain with timber windows, painted timber windows. But this building isn't listed, so it's a little bit more of a grey area.
It certainly had a really checkered background that, you know, it hadn't been able to be sold for years because of some sort of problematic thing with the church ownership. And so the fact that it's actually inhabited is pretty spectacular.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments? Mark?
As Sheila said most of the things that I would have said. I walk past it practically every day, and I get into conversation with the applicant, especially since she took down the scruffy fence, scruffy hedge, and her house is a lot more exposed now. And we've talked about how it's gone on, and we've talked about how she may wish to replace that fence one day, or a hedge. There is obviously antipathy with the neighbour, but that's not something we have to deal with here. And I'm happy to talk to both parties if we have to get to that stage as the ward councillor. I agree that I don't think it's a bad looking application. If we want to take advice from the conservation officer to make sure it's perhaps a little more in keeping with what people would like to see, then that's all well and good. That's what they're there for. But as it stands, I'm not against the application as it is.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Rich?
Thanks, Steve. Can I just add, to go back to what Jane said, I think it's important that the annex is tied to the house if it comes about. I think that's important because I kind of would object if they were trying to put two houses there. That wouldn't sort of feel right to me. But yeah, as it is, barring conservation kind of materials and everything else, I quite like it.
Great, thanks. Paul?
I just wanted to slightly, or put the other point of view regards the conditioning of the annex. I get what Richard said and what James suggested. It probably wouldn't be good if they were able to be sold off as separate dwellings. Certainly, if the annex came with permitted development rights, etc. But I mean, it's inevitable, as I think it says in the design and access statement or the planning application or whatever, that the annex is designed for the owner's elderly father. And of course, elderly fathers don't go on forever. And when the elderly father eventually dies or goes into a home or whatever, are the owners expected just to leave the annex empty because they're not allowed to do anything else with it? I think it would be reasonable for them to, as Jane suggested, kind of rent it out to someone as, you know, an affordable rent or something like that. Maybe it wouldn't be reasonable for them to sell it. I don't know, but is it possible to have some sort of nuanced condition that allows rent but not sale?
Jane?
I mean, the standard condition is that it shouldn't be sold or let separately unless otherwise agreed in writing by the local planning authority. So I would be surprised if they detracted from that condition, but what it would mean is at such a time as when, you know, elderly father is no longer with us, they would still have the opportunity to apply to vary that condition, which would enable them to let it if that was what they wanted to do, which does seem a very long-winded way around it, but it doesn't mean that they can never let it. It just means they have to get permission to do that before they do it. And there are lots of implications about council tax and how that is charged depending on how the annex is used, which I don't profess to understand, but that's something that they would need to look at later.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? No, great. So I get the vibe that we're not against this per se, and that we sort of will sort of defer to the conservation officer with what he says with regards to some of the elements in terms of size and how it fits into the other houses in that particular area. Jane?
So I just wanted to check whether councillors feel that the extension is too big, and the suggestion that Paul made about reducing the size of the west wing is something that's shared by all councillors, or is it just a case of that, you know, we've got no objection in principle, subject to the conservation officer being happy with the proposals? So if you could just perhaps indicate whether or not you feel it is too big or not, that would help me put together a response. No? Okay, that's sorted then. Okay, so my suggestion, actually, and I wasn't quite sure how everybody felt about whether or not you want us to say we feel that it should be tied to the main house. Yeah. Okay, so I'm getting nods to that one. Okay, so I would suggest that our response is that we have no objection to the proposals in principle, subject to the comments from the conservation officer, and we would like to see a condition that ties the annex to the main house so that it cannot be sold or let separately.
Okay.
Somebody like to propose that?
Is it sold, sorry, is it sold or let separately unless another application is applied for or something like that? Is that?
Yes, yeah. Okay.
Great. Someone propose it. Is that Rich? Is that a proposal? Yeah. And someone second, Sheila, and all those in favour?
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
As a aside, obviously we know there is an issue between the parties around there. Is there any merit in us trying to get involved, or is that sort of not for us to get involved? I don't know. I mean, Mark and Sheila, you know the people there.
Only if there is a problem, a continuing problem. Let's hope there isn't.
It's not there isn't. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Great.
I know there's still a dispute over a boundary.
Yes, that's been going on for a while, isn't it?
And access to, and I don't know what stage that's at. I don't know whether that's gone to law or not.
Okay. Wait for Jane. Great.
Oh yes, sorry, I was just writing all that down.
No, that's fine. Should we do number 348 now, which is the land to the north of North Hill?
Yeah, okay. So this application is number 348 on our list. And really the reason for talking about this one is, as I alluded to earlier, I just wanted to confirm that the land is within the town council's ownership as it's part of the North Parade allotment site. However, we aren't the applicant in this case, and with tree applications, the applicant doesn't have to notify the owners of the land, but obviously they will need the landowner's permission before they can do any works to the trees. So I've had a chat with Chris Stringer, and he doesn't have any objection to this application. In fact, he thinks it would be a benefit to that area of the allotments because it would reduce the shade and be more beneficial to the allotment holders there. So it was really just to clarify that it wasn't our application, and that's that we don't have any objection to it, but do councillors agree that there's no objection with that?
Yeah, great.
Thank you. And then the next one, we did talk about whether we 355 on our list, which is 81A Keyford. Although from the responses that you previously sent, it seems that actually that there's a lot of support for this application. for the demolition of an existing garage and the erection of a 2-storey dwelling with associated parking and external space. As I say, you know, the design is not necessarily in keeping with the area, but I think that's actually what most of you have liked. You know, that it's a simple design, somebody said, but actually, you know, it's quite an I can't say innovative design as well. So I think unless anybody is completely against it, I'm not sure that we really need to discuss it in any more detail, really.
Mm-hmm.
And one has just been done nearby in very similar style, hasn't it?
Yeah. Next door, actually, I think has done something very similar.
Is it just worth commenting? I really enjoyed the design and access statement for that. There was loads of information, history and everything. It was really well thought out, so good effort.
Paul, then Lizzie? Or Lizzie?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say I support it. And the main thing is, well, I mean, I like the design, you know, and I think it's appropriate, but it's the use of materials, really. They seem to be using high quality materials as far as I can see. And I think a design such as it is, which is certainly a simple design, really kind of fails or is successful based on the materials used. And I think, you know, it's obviously, there's some large expanses of brickwork without any windows, etc. And depending on the kind of bricks that are used, that could look fan prison. And I think it looks like they're planning to reuse the existing bricks, which appear to be handmade, possibly old bricks. So if they reuse those and then also use similar bricks, I think it could look fantastic.
Great, thanks. Lizzie?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said, that the additional thing that I wanted to note as a real positive is somebody building a 2-bedroom house, because we spend an awful lot of time in these meetings turning 3-bedroom houses into 4 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms into 5 bedrooms. So actually, you know, there is a risk that we run out of smaller properties at some point. So to see a new one coming forward, using the site sensibly, not going big and crazy, is actually really, really a nice thing to see.
Yeah, it is a great use of a small site. Any other comments? Jane?
As we've discussed previously, we quite often say no objection and we don't necessarily praise the good applications. So I just wondered if this was an instance where, you know, we might want to just reflect everything that you've just said. So no objection to the application. We like the use of quality materials and a well-documented design and access statement. I'm glad to see the provision of a 2-bedroom house coming forward. Yeah. Okay, does somebody like to propose that for me?
Mark? And second, please. Lizzie? All in favour? Thanks.
That's great, that's unanimous, thank you. Thank you, and then last that we have highlighted for discussion is the application for the silk mill at Merchants Barton, which is number 362 and 363 on our list. This application is for a proposed new gallery entrance building, a fire escape platform and steps with a 1-storey barrel roof bar with toilets, glazed walkway and a shingle roof covering for an outside bar. So this is both a full application and a listed building application. And you may recall that in 2019 there was a similar application submitted, and on the notes that I sent through to you, I put the plans side by side so you could just see the slight difference in the applications. From the design and access statement, it appeared that the nature of the bar as they proposed it previously, that there would have been noise escaping from that, which would have had an impact on neighbours and other residents in the area. So that bar area has now been more enclosed. The location of the toilets has moved around, with the kitchen and the vestibule sort of staying in a similar position. I think previously we said that we didn't feel that the drawings included enough information to show the impact on the listed building, and from the responses that I've seen so far, I'm sensing, well, certainly I feel that that's the case this time round, and that's also reflected in the comments from the Civic Society. Just, yeah, so they're saying for works toward listed buildings, the drawings do not provide enough information to assess the impact of the proposals on the listed building. The proposed entrance porch with its flat projecting roof and part glazed walls lacks any detailed information showing how large the areas of glazing will be, how the large areas of glazing will be held, and that the cedar shingle lean-to roof next to the barrel vaulted zinc metal roof is incongruous. No information is provided for the metal gates. And the overall composition and new forms and materials proposed is discordant, making a poor foil to the historic buildings. I mean, I think generally last time, you know, whilst we welcome the improvements to that building, we just didn't feel that the plans were detailed enough to, as the Civic Society have said, the actual impact that the works will have on the silk mill.
Any questions? Anita?
Yeah, am I right in thinking when this came up before, we looked at the positioning, the location of the toilets, and they seem to be in completely the wrong place? This is the same one, isn't it?
It is, yes.
But have they still got those toilets in that same badly placed area? It just
no, I think they have moved. Let me just have a look at the plans. No, they are in a slightly different position now, rather than yeah, that they're now, previously they were next to where they were going to have an awning, and now they have moved them next to the bar area, which we're covered in. They're not that far, they're not that much of a different location, but they have been moved around slightly.
okay. It just seemed very illogical last time. You had to go all the way around the building, I seem to remember, to get to them.
Yeah. They will now be located next to the bar, which would seem
Okay.
a sensible place to me.
Okay. That's fine. Thanks, Jen.
So yeah, it's really just whether or not, and again, you know, as we said with the Whittocks Lane application, you know, the silk mill is a hugely historic building within the town, and any development there is something that the conservation officer would really scrutinise, and I imagine that they would, if they don't feel that they have got enough information shown in those plans, they will be asking for some further drawings, which we will then be subsequently consulted on. So,
Thanks. Any other comments? Sheila, then Rob, then Lizzie. Paul, sorry.
I noticed in Paul's comments, which are always really useful. Thank you, Paul. If you wait till they come out first. You mentioned it was slightly confusing, the sort of arrangement there, and I must admit I did find it really confusing. There's funny little sort of open areas at one end and then open area at the other end, more gates, metal gates, and all sorts of things. And I just wondered whether anybody's managed to work out what's going on there, or is it just a sort of series of open areas because that's the way they've ended up planning it? I mean, it doesn't seem to. If I think about when I've been there and used the bar and gone to the you know, the events on in the Silk Mill Gallery place. You know, it seems to be breaking up that space a lot, and I don't see how that benefits, or it just does seem a bit strange. I just couldn't get why they were doing it that way.
Paul.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think I said it lacks coherence. I mean, what I would say possibly is that I would support the planning application in principle. I think it's good. You know, they trying to improve the situation, trying to improve the toilets, trying to address the noise concerns from the main gallery space so they can use it for events. There's lots of really positive things. However, it seems to be that it's a little bit like someone's had a brainstorming session and they're going to chuck everything in a hat and just going to put everything together in one slightly incoherent design, which I kind of reluctantly have to say I think we should object to, because it's a real shame. It's a building, the Silk Mill building, and it really warrants a sensitive, coherent approach to this kind of development. And I think it's possible, absolutely possible, to do something which will really work, but we're not there yet. And as everyone said, we haven't really got enough detail to determine that. But from the detail we've got, we're still not there. It is an improvement on the previous application, just looking at it, but yeah, it's still not really there, I don't think.
Thanks. Lizzie?
Just to say, I think we would all be really supportive of the Silk Mill building. You know, it's becoming such a hub, and it's such a vibrant space in a part of town that is going to, you know, become more important, more central to the centre, more central to Frome. So it would be lovely to see something really special happening in that space. But it's hard to get that sense of what it is with the level of detail that we've been given. And, you know, how I think I agree with Paul's comments about, you know, how to make it something that really works in that space rather than the sort of slightly hodgepodge set of, well, we need one of these, so we'll put it here. But yeah, I think supporting the desire to do more with that space and make it really fabulous, but perhaps the implementation isn't quite there yet.
Great, thanks. Rich?
I agree with that. I think it's the detail that's missing, isn't it, really? It's we just looked to somewhere, Keyford, where there's stacks of information, lots of things you can look at. You've got a very easy, clear view of what was being done. And then there's two sketches. I kind of think, well, I don't disagree in principle, but I don't really understand what's going on really enough. You know, it feels like I need a bit more information.
Jane?
Just to respond to Sheila's question, really, looking at the floor plan, it almost looks as if they've concentrated on trying to utilise the courtyard area with the bar, you know, so when they have the sort of food events there, so that would work quite nicely, but it's not. It doesn't really seem to link itself back to the main gallery, so that it could, you know, could be used more as a whole. And I think you're right. We'll have one of those, and one of those, because that's what we need. But they haven't quite been thought out as to how they flow. You know, you could use them all together. But I think as a separate use, the way it's laid out probably works quite well. But I would imagine that you know, it's the building as a whole that's important in this case.
Also, they haven't changed things that I think would really make it work better. You know, like, I mean, I've been to events there where I've had to start clearing up because they couldn't cope. And that was because the kitchen is absolutely widgy. And as far as I can work out, they haven't changed that. And it would make much more sense to have the kitchen near the bar and the, you know, I mean, I don't know. It just seems, you know, I was thinking, I was starting to draw things out myself, you know, on this particular design to see how it could work a bit better, and that seems a bit weird, but I agree. It's I I don't know that we can object to it in that it's you know, does it cause a problem? It's trying to solve a problem, but I just think it's rather, you know, unimaginative and not really, you know, really looking at what the issues are there and saying, okay, how could we really make this work if there was going to be as many people as they have had on the festival nights in that area? Still wouldn't work the way they've got it now.
Any other comments? Anita?
Can I just clarify, because it doesn't, I'm not very good at reading these plans, so forgive me. But are we assuming then that the new awning bit with the new bar and the toilets, is that just outside but under the awning, or is it actually part of the internal building?
So that plan that shows the awning, that was the one that was submitted in 2019 and was then withdrawn. So the one on the right hand side now does away with the awning, so that will be where the roof, can't recall what the material was now, so that will be more of a structure rather than.
But it is actually open to the air, that's what we're saying.
No, I don't believe so. That will be
It looks like it's got a bifold door or something like that along the front.
so that will be glazed with, as Paul says, like a bifold door. I mean, I imagine, you know, when the weather is nice, that those doors will be opened up, and essentially it will still look, it would be more of an awning, but it can be enclosed, or at least that's how I've read the plans anyway.
So on the new plan, the dotted line that's around the new bar and toilets, I just assumed that that sort of awning would still be there. That's the impression I got. I've obviously read that wrongly.
Given that there isn't a lot of detail on the plans, it's actually difficult to answer that question.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So basically, it's lack of detail is sort of not really allowing us to make a decision, isn't it? Really. So
just to answer that question, just quickly, I'm just looking at one of the elevations, and it looks like the roof over the bar is a wooden shingled roof, lean-to type roof, and the other part, the other dotted line, is an extension of the zinc clad metal kind of barrel vaulted roof, which is, again, this is this kind of incongruous kind of difference of materials and different shaped roofs and etc. etc.
Perhaps we could get an artist's impression. There must be a few artists there.
It certainly helps, doesn't it?
I mean,
Jane, what do you think?
I was just going to say, I wonder whether councillors feel that the comments that the Civic Society have made are actually a good reflection of the issues here, or not.
Can you remind us?
Okay, so for works to a listed building, the drawings do not provide enough information to assess the impact of the proposals on the listed building. The proposed entrance porch, with its flat projecting roof and part glazed walls, lacks any detailed information showing how large the areas of glazing will be. Got it wrong again. How the large areas of glazing will be held. The cedar shingle lean-to roof next to the barrel vaulted zinc metal roof is incongruous. No information is provided for the metal gates, and the overall composition and new forms and materials proposed is discordant, making a poor foil to the historic buildings.
Yeah.
Phew.
That's what we said. Discordant. We're going to use discordant in future meetings.
So are you happy for us to reiterate the Civic Society's comments in relation to this application?
Absolutely.
Okay. Would somebody like to propose that?
That's Rich. And second, Anita. Great. All those in favour?
And that's unanimous. Thank you. So I hadn't actually highlighted any of the other applications specifically for discussion, unless there is any others that anybody particularly wants us to talk about in any more detail. I would suggest that whilst we may have a few concerns about some of the others, actually there aren't necessarily any planning grounds to object, but to say there might be some that you want to discuss in more detail.
Paul and then Sheila.
I wouldn't mind just mentioning 358 briefly, because this is I think this is one that the Civic Society have objected to on the grounds of is that right? Is it the grounds of the fence, or am I getting me up? Actually, it's not this one that's got the fence, is it?
It's
No.
that's 361.
Yeah, okay, but anyway, this one without the fence. I'm not suggesting that we object to it. I think I wrote on my comments kind of reluctant, no objection, and the reason for that was really that it was uninspiring, and it's another big extension, a little bit like Whittock's Lane. But it doesn't have any of the flair of the Whittock's Lane one. It basically, when you look at the application form, the list of materials, it basically says as existing, as existing, as existing. And I'd like to kind of, I don't know if there's some way that we could encourage applicants, developers or whatever to be a bit more creative in their designs or the use of materials. So yeah, I don't have any objection to this, it's kind of okay, but it's just not uninspiring. So that's what I wanted to say.
Probably comes down to cost.
Sheila, did you have?
Yeah, it was actually 361 that I was just going to ask some clarification on, because it looks like that fence they're proposing to put in. I'm not sure why they're proposing to. Maybe they just want more privacy, I suppose. But it just seems such a shame that sort of, in those areas, there's quite often a little pathway or a pavement, and then a bit of grass, and it sort of opens up sightlines through the corner that building is on. And to shove a fence up there that's right up close to the door, can't see. It's not even on the edge of the grass. It seems to be cutting it through the middle, unless I'm misinterpreting the design, the plan. And I thought, well, that is okay. You can do it. It's your land. You can shove a fence up there. But it seems such a shame to actually do it with a fence rather than say some shrubbery or something a bit more sensitive to an open plan area that area is. I really don't like those fences. They're horrible.
It makes it all enclosed, doesn't it? If it's not careful, if everyone did it, it would be,
Yeah,
wouldn't be open anymore.
The fence will butt right next to the line of the footpath. Yeah.
Okay, because it seemed to, on the plan, I didn't understand the plan properly. Okay.
So how does that fit in terms of planning, Jane? I mean, can we suggest alternatives?
Oh, well, we can. I don't think it will have an impact on driver visibility necessarily, but when that estate was built, it was presumably designed in such a way that that it was open plan, and it did have those views throughout the estate. And yes, anybody walking around that corner on the footpath won't have a view around the corner, if you like, so they may not feel as safe in that position. I imagine the reason that they're doing it is so that they can open up from what is essentially their back garden and have a larger enclosed garden area. We could suggest a hedge, but obviously that's going to take time to get to that height, which is probably why they're reluctant to do that. But yeah, I mean, I do think the principle of if you like, losing those views through the open plan nature of the houses there, or of the front gardens, if you like, would be a shame to lose it. And you know, that is a reasonable ground for objection if that's what we wanted to do.
Has anyone else got any thoughts, views, or no?
No strong opinion.
No strong opinion.
No strong opinion. I agree. You can maybe look at something a bit more interesting, but I don't really know their reasons for wanting to do it, but it is their land. And if they want to enclose it and have a private garden, I guess we can't object to that unless there's some real reasons like traffic or anything else. I'd feel like I was intruding somehow, but no.
Yeah.
So is that a no objection to that one?
I guess, yeah.
Okay. Are there any others that anybody would like to discuss in more detail?
Lizzie.
Not sure if it's in more detail. It's just the tree at number 351, the tree at 1 Keyford Terrace, which was the ash tree at the rear of 1 Keyford Terrace within 3 foot of a rear wall of the property. And I think in your notes, Jane, you'd said that there was no supporting evidence. So I just wanted to check that how we were going to go back and kind of resolve that one.
Whilst there was no supporting evidence, they had made the statement that they'd previously been told that it could be felled because of its proximity to the rear wall of the property. So I guess reading between the lines, the reason they want to fell it is because it's impacting on the wall of that property. And you know, this is something that we've said over and over again, trying to improve the quality of tree applications that are submitted, to make it easier to understand people's reasons why, and also sometimes to even identify which particular tree is being talked about. I mean, given that this is a application for a tree where it's in a conservation area, actually, it's not like a planning application, it is only a notification. So in that respect, I think whilst we would like to see it, it's perhaps more difficult for Mendip to insist that those things are submitted. Whereas when it's for works to a tree that's already protected by a protection order, then yes, you know, they can ask for that information. But yeah, I like banging your head against the wall. We keep asking for better information on tree applications, but sadly, we don't get it. So.
And are we able to put a comment in saying, you know, this may well go ahead because the tree officer says, yeah, it's appropriate for this to go ahead, and we bow to the tree officer. No pun. But that we would love to see kind of replacement of tree with something perhaps smaller, more suitable, etc., etc. Just to keep reiterating that message that you can't just
absolutely we can
out
yeah.
trees and lose biodiversity. We have to keep refilling. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Yep, that's good.
And even that, you know, they could apply to the council for a, you know, we want to plant trees. We may have suitable trees.
Chris will thank me for that.
Yeah. Well, it's an ash tree. It's going to die anyway. Poor old beast. You know, it's going to respond to ash dieback probably.
Yeah, it'd be good to replace it, wouldn't it? Definitely.
Yeah. It is a shame, those trees.
Anything else? Great. Okay, so can we just vote that for all the other applications on the agenda appendix for this meeting, we have no objection? If someone could, Lizzie, thanks for that, and someone could second it, that's Rich, and we could all vote on that. Thank you.
That's unanimous, thank you.
Great. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for all turning up. The next planning meeting will be on the 17th of September. 2020. And I guess by Zoom again.
Probably, yes.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.